So I get a lot of questions about like in-season training, sports-specific training, how do we balance practices and games and still fitting in my training? And of course, the answer is every athlete, every sport, every team probably needs a slightly different plan. Football is a little bit easier. You only have one game per week typically, which is on either Fridays or Saturdays most of the time. And so it allows, an easier plan to be put in place where maybe Mondays and Wednesdays you have strength and conditioning as part of practice or after practice. Okay. Other sports, you might have multiple games per week, it might change every single week. And of course, that's when it's going to vary based on what point in the season you're in and also how many games you have that week with how many training sessions and strength sessions you're going to get in. To keep things simple, I'm going to say that you don't need a different program in season as you do out of season. You're just going to do less. And so you may do only one workout per week in season, okay? Instead of, 2, 3, or 4, of course. That's going to be more than enough to not only like maintain your strength, but also if it's done correctly, you still can get stronger when you're training once per week, if it's strategic and it's done appropriately. At the same time, another thing that you can do is you can just do less sets. And so if you're training 2, 3, 4 times in the off season, you still might be able to train 2, 3, 4 times in season, depending on the sport and the demands, of course, in the schedule. But you would just do maybe one set, one challenging working set, instead of maybe 2, 3, or 4 challenging working sets in the off season. Okay. And so that's a really easy and good way to still see progress and not overtrain in season, and rather than just doing nothing. And that's the mistake I see too many teams and coaches and athletes and people in general making, is they work really hard in the off season, they strength train, they do conditioning, and then they get into the season and they just do nothing other than play the sport. And we want to make sure that we're not getting weaker. We want to make sure that we're not getting deconditioned depending on our sport. We just might not have enough conditioning in playing the sport or in practice. And that's probably another story for another day. Your conditioning shouldn't just be this like half-assed thing that coaches are doing at the end of practice, where it's like, there's no thought process in it. And that's just how people get hurt, burnt out, and injured. But we'll talk about that in a different video. You want to make sure that you're still training in season. This is also going to help you with some sort of recovery, and also with preventing injuries and muscle imbalances, and continuing to improve in your sport. Now, there's also a level of what we call GPP. And so now, if we're talking out of season, okay, like what do we do? What's the best program? Like, I believe out of season, we should be focusing on GPP, which is general physical preparedness. This means just becoming a better, well-rounded athlete, okay? If you're more athletic, you're going to be better at your sport. It's as simple as that. If you're stronger, if you're faster, if you're more powerful, you're more explosive, you're more mobile and flexible, you can jump higher, your miles better, and your row time is better. You could do more body weight exercises. You're just going to perform better than the person that's only doing their sport, or they're only working on just very specific exercises that only translate maybe to the sport. Again, as opposed to just working on all your muscles and your body as a whole, and just all different types of exercises and training and stimuluses and strength, you're going to be more resilient and less prone to injury. And that's why I believe a program that can be focused on GPP in the off season, which is just getting better at essentially everything, strength and conditioning and fitness related, is in all athletes' best interests. It also prevents overuse injuries. It also fixes overuse injuries and underuse injuries. And, that's what we do here in our group training classes. So that would be off season. At the same time, you can then program a specific sprint, maybe plyometric workout, or a longer cardio conditioning workout, depending on if it's more of an endurance sport or if it's more of a short burst sport like maybe football and wrestling. You can do some agility training depending on, again, the sport and the demands. But that still would be part of a GPP program where you are training agility as a skill or as a different training of just a better, more well-rounded athlete. And once again, that skill and that agility and that better athlete and athleticism is just going to make you better at all sports and less injury prone. And so we can in season do, that's really where like the hard stuff should be done already. The hard work and the most of the strength is built and most of the conditioning is done, and we can still make improvements and we can still get stronger, but it's much harder in season when you have practices maybe 5 days a week and games once a week like football, or if you have wrestling tournaments where you have 3 matches or 4 matches on a weekend. You might even have a match on the Friday night. You might even have a match like earlier in the week, or multiple games like lacrosse. That's where it gets harder to balance training and conditioning and strength with the games, with practice, of course, with maybe school if you're a high school athlete, and just the overall demands that come with being a student athlete. And so my recommendation is always to work with a professional strength and conditioning coach like we have here at One Life, like myself, so that they can create a plan that's best for you based on your sport, based on your schedule, and not have you overtrained, burnt out, and more